Okay, let's get into this week's shiur. This will be part 2 of our Chazara. Again, volume 16 of the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Halacha, but these are Hilchot Shabbat, the Lax family edition, and the Weiss family volume 16. We already had a shiur of Chazara on the first 4 topics, the first 4 shiurim, and now let's have a Chazara shiur on shiur 5 through 8, and that'll be all the halachas relating to davening on Shabbos, Tefillah part 1, Tefillah part 2, Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum, and the introduction to Kiddush. So those are the 4 shiurim that we're going to chazer. Again, Chazara, we will not review everything. We'll just have various pointers to remind ourselves and to remember and solidify some of the information that we had. We won't mention every shita. We'll try to mention at least the topics, and hopefully that'll jar our memory and do what we can to solidify the information. So we started off the first shiur, which is shiur number 5. If you're following in the Sefer, page 193, it's the beginning of shiur number 5. We have Mincha and Erev Shabbos. Mincha and Erev Shabbos, we know, it seems like a regular Mincha of the weekday, but without Tachnun. But that without Tachnun says a lot. That means the aura of Shabbos already is with us. As we know, on any Shabbos or Yontif, we already feel it on Erev Shabbos. Right, by the way, that's one of the dayas that the mitzvah of eating on Erev Yom Kippur is about. It's the Suda of Yom Kippur. There's a Shari Tshuva like that, which means you could have the Suda on Erev Yom Kippur, but it's not Yom Kippur yet. The aura of Yom Kippur is already felt. So there you already see it even in a halachic way. But really every Shabbos, and that's what the Torah says, we don't say Tachnun because we already feel Shabbos. The Gemara even reflects this as well. The Gemara in Moed Katan, we saw Daf Chav Zayin, that if somebody is an Avel sitting Shiva, then all the mitos in the days of old, there was a custom of turning over the beds, so the beds could be turned up, right side up, already on Erev Shabbos, ben a mincha v'lamala. Even though an Avel is not allowed to sit on a regular chair until later, but already min mincha v'lamala, you could already do skifas hamitos because you already see the Shabbos is already upon us. We mentioned then the thought of Rav Soloveitchik that maybe there's a chiluk between base avel and nihuge avelus. Again, not our topic now, but he can't sit on a bed yet because there are nihuge avelus, but there's a special din of a base avel, and that is what is affected on Shabbos already, Mina Mincha Vilamala. Already, even in one daven's Mincha Gedola, an earlier time on Friday, still the Mishnah Berurah says one doesn't say Tachnun. We should try to daven Mincha. And the tzibur should try to daven mincha bisman. The Shmir Shabbos says in source number 5, Hamispalal tfilas mincha betzibur yishtadol sheispalu ba'od moed. Try to daven when it's early enough. The hainu she'efshar yelekabel as Shabbos lefachos zman muat lefnei shkia. Like we spoke about in the last year of Tosefah Shabbos, we should finish mincha beforehand because by shkia you don't have a choice anymore. That's already ben hashmashas. So we should try to finish mincha before so one can be mekabel. One can be mekabel. What happens if a shul already there's one minyan and they're already doing Kabbalah Shabbos? It's not so right to go in the middle of Kabbalah Shabbos and daven mincha. Right, one should daven mincha outside the shul, and then go in if they're already inside. Right, that's what the Isha Yisrael says. Lo yispalel afilu biyachidus betoch beis haknesses asher bo kfar kiblu as hashabbos. El yesi achutzav yispalel sham. You could daven there. Again, what does it mean? Kfar kiblu as hashabbos. At the beginning of Kabbalah Shabbos, l'chun arana, and those probably are in a Kabbalah Shabbos. Yeah, once you get to L'chadodi, once you get to Mizmar Shir, then for sure that is a Kabbalah Shabbos. So Kabbalah Shabbos, like we have today, is based on Shabbos Kuf Yotes. The Gemara tells us that some of the Amoraim used to go out and greet the Shabbos and say, Bo v'deitze likra Shabbos Hamalka. Go out. Rabbi Yana used to wear special clothing to go greet the Shabbos Hamalka. But again, this Kabbalah Shabbos didn't really take so much root in the way that we have it until, of course, the Arizal. The Arizal and his chevra in Tzfat in the 1500s. Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, who's the author of L'Chadodi and the Sefer Charedim and the Alshich, all of the Rabbanim of the time. So they were the ones that really put put the Kabbalah Shabbos as we have it on the map. The Arizal instituted to say Mizmor LaDavid, right? Havul Hashem B'nei Elim, to say that as Shabbos begins, the Gemara in Maseches Brachos Daf Chavtes connects this to Shabbos. Right? We know we've mentioned that the brachos of every Amida, the source of it has to be found in Tanakh somewhere as a matir, as we have spoken about then. So the seven brachos that we have in a Shabbos Amida, what is that keneged? So it's keneged the 7 times it says the word kol in that mizmar, in Mizmor LaDavid. And there's a minute to stand up when you say it, because the Gemara also uses that mizmar to say that the 18 times Shem Hashem appears in that mizmar is keneged the 18 brachos of the Amida. Good. We also say Mizbar Shili Yom HaShabbos because Mizbar Shili Yom HaShabbos. The Mefarshim wonder, what does that have to do with Shabbos? That whole Mizbar says nothing about Shabbos. So the Levush says in source number 10 in Arachaim Reish Pei Aleph that it's all about Hodol Hagid Baboger Chazdecha. Shabbos is the day that we get to think about Hashem a little more and in a more with more clarity. We're not focused on so many other things that we have during the week. So maybe that's what has to do with Shabbos. That first pasuk. But the Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky notes in his Sefer Emes Liakov that maybe the Medrash says that there were special scrolls that used to be read by the Jews in Mitzrayim to give them chizuk. And that day, and Shabbos was the day that they had a rest until it was taken away as things got worse when Moshe Rabbeinu came back. But maybe this is one of those scrolls, suggested Rabbi Yaakov, because it talks about Tzaddik V'Ralo, Rosh V'Tovlo, and that Hashem is going to take care of everything in the future. Maybe that's the connection to Shabbos. Also, the psukim in L'chon Arana, they'll talk about Yemos HaMashiach, right? The 7 paragraphs connected the 7 days of the Bria. So Shabbos is Me'ein Olam Haba. So that is why we say some of these paragraphs. Also, I'm going to say Baba Malikin, an ancient, a very old custom. The Shulchan Aruch quotes that to say Baba Malikin to remember the dinim of halakas neighbors, the second parak of Meseches Shabbos. Okay. So then we get to Ma'ariv. So we spoke about Mincha and the time. We spoke about Kabbalah Shabbos, and now we're up to Ma'ariv. So Ma'ariv starts off in the normal way. We don't say V'hu Rachum, because the Shabbos itself is full of Rachmanus. But Hashkivenu, as we know, has a different ending. Hashkivenu, the Tur quotes, Ve'ein Chosbin, we're on page 201. Ve'ein Chosbin Shomer Amo Yisrael La'ad, where we don't say that Hashem guards over us, because we don't need Shmir on Shabbos. Shabbos guards us, right? But the Shabbos says, Ein Tzrich and Shmir, Shabbos Shomer, Shabbos guards us. And then the minhag is to say, V'shamru, the Tur quotes that, V'shamru B'nei Yisrael. And how does one allowed to say that? How is one allowed to say that? What do you mean, how is one allowed to say that? Smichas Gul Tefillah, the Gemara in the beginning of Brachas talks about, you're not allowed to have a hefsek between Gal Yisrael and Amida. So how could you have, so Hashkivenu, the Gemara says, Tefillah arichta, we stretch the tefillah. Hashem svasai tiftach, we stretch the amida. It's, there's geula arichta. Hashkivenu is geula arichta. And Hashem svasai tiftach is tefillah arichta. Kishem Hashem ekra, that's nowhere in Shas. That's why we only say kishem when we don't need smichas geula tefillah. By Musaf and by Mincha and by Ne'ilah. What about for Shamru? That's nowhere in Shas. So the Torah says, well, the Gemara tells us, if we keep 2 Shabbosos or 1 Shabbos, depending on the Girsa, we will be redeemed. So that's why Shabbos is connected to Geula, and that is why we say that's where Vishamru comes from. The Shulchan Aruch does not mention Vishamru, right? Based on the Vilna Gaon, maybe this is nowhere in the Shas, and therefore one shouldn't say it. But the minhag of Klal Yisrael is to say Vishamru, and we also say, many say Vayidaber, Moshe's Moadei Hashem on Chagim. What does that have to do with the Geula? Well, all the Chagim are Zecher L'Siyas Mitzrayim, so that's okay. What about Rosh Hashanah? Tinku B'Chodesh Shofar. So the Lavush says, it's a reminder of Tikka B'Chodesh Shofar, the Geula Ha'asid, the Tekab Shofar Gadol L'Cherusenu. What about Yom Kippur? So again, the Lavush says, Ein L'cha Gula greater than the Geula of Yom Kippur, the Geula HaNefesh. So they all have something to do with Geula, and that is why the minhag is for Moshe to say it. It could also be there's a Rashba that says that it is all connected. Maybe it's like an announcement. Anything l'tzorach tefillah is not a hefsek. So it's an announcement. You're announcing, remember to say this Shmona Esrei. So if you remember this Shmona Esrei, that's also would be allowed. But getting back to our discussion, Hashkivenu, we say a special ending of Ufros Aleinu, Hapori Sukkah Shalom. If one didn't say it, one is not Choser. Mishnah Berurah quotes one is not Choser if one didn't say it. Often, you remember right after you finish. If you remember right after you finish, then one could also say it right there. Shemar Yisrael Ad, Hapori Sukkah Shalom Aleinu, and continue with the correct one. And after the Amida, so then we have the minhag of saying Vayachulu. Well, first we have Vayachulu in Shmona Esrei, right? In the Amida. The Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Yates tells us, source number 16, that if anybody who davens and says Vayachulu, it's kilu, a person becomes a shutaf, a partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Maisa Brachus. So when I testify about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creations, I'm partnering. I'm letting everybody know about this shutfus. The Rosh says that what do you have to say Vayachulu after what do you have to say Vayachulu after Shmona Esrei? You already said this during Shmona Esrei. So the Rosh says, well, it's because when we have a Yontif on Shabbos, so then one wouldn't be saying Vayachulu. One says Atav Achartanu, one says a different Shemona Esrei, and that's why, because of the Yontif Shechalias b'Shabbos, we don't say Vayachulu in Shemona Esrei. So that's why we say it then. That's amazing. But 90% of the time we say it, but because of that 10%, we don't want to be mechali. The Shulchan Aruch also quotes, or maybe it's all another reason we say it is from L'misha Eina Yodea. If somebody that didn't know how to daven, so then we would say it then too. But that is the minhag. We say Vayachulu not only in Shemona Esrei, but we say it afterwards for those various reasons. And then comes along the Taz. The Taz is the one that said, we're giving Eidus. Vayachulu is like Eidus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. So if we're giving Eidus, well, you're never an aid by yourself. Eid Echad, you have to be an aid with somebody. So that is why it's a good idea to say Vayachulu with someone. On the bottom of the page, the Machzor HaShekel, this is not on your sheet, said, what do you mean? But Eidim don't testify mamish at the same time. It's one after another. So, but still, it's Eidus on Brias HaOlam. So maybe you have a higher standard. But that's what the Taz says. One should try to say Vayachulu with someone else. V'im yirtze yachid la'omro, and if a yachid wants to say it themselves, then have kavana that you're being Korei Batorah, because it's not really good Eidus. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes this Taz. They should always try to have someone else. That's why if somebody has a long Shemona Esrei, the minhag is to get someone else, and you say it with them. And if you're only a yachid, you have kavana only kikorei batorah. The Bir Halacha even goes as far as to say that maybe we should hurry up our Shemona Esrei to be able to make sure that I say it with a tzibur. Yemaher l'sayim tfilaso. And other achronim say, what? This is all based on a chumrah of the Taz that we don't even fully understand. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't quote that, and for that you should not have as much kavana in your Shemona Esrei for Shabbos. So they don't say that should be done. The Chazon Ish and the Or Letzion, it's not Ma'akev, it's Eidos Balayla. So Bavadai says the Or Letzion that one should not be Memaher their Tefillah K'dei Lahaspik Yilomar Yachad im Hatzibur. But that's the point. The Chazon Ish writes also in the next source, Ein L'tam Ze Ein Yachad Kofa Vayachulu. He quotes it's a machlokes, but he says, "Delo masinu ze beposkim ve'en lono lachadish dvarim ve'nira dein lahader achar shnayim lo masinu beposkim." You don't have to hurry your Shemona Esrei, and you don't have to say it with two. But the minhag is like the Taz quoted in the Mishnah Berurah that one should try to have someone else to say it because it is a type of Eidus. So we've spoken about the Shemona Esrei, the Vayachulu, and now we get to Magen Avos. So Magen Avos is something that we don't have on a usual night. And it looks like a Chazara Hashatz. It's a mini Chazara Hashatz that we have on Friday night. Where does it come from? So the Mefarshim explain, as we know, the early Mefarshim, that this was Niskana, the Taz says in source 27, Mishum Sakanas Mazikin. The Mazikin, because they used to daven out in the fields, and if somebody comes a little late, and they finish a little late, they're going to be left there by themselves and have to leave the field by themselves. So we don't want to leave anybody there by themselves. So we extend the davening a little bit. So if somebody came late, we still have Magen Avos, and in that way everybody could leave together. But because of that, the Shulchan Aruch says this is only a tefillah that's said b'tzibur, right? If somebody's at home, they don't say Magen Avos. Again, it's like a miniature Chazara Hashatz, and the Shulchan Aruch says, if you want to say it yourself, below psicha below chasima. You could say it without a psicha chasima, without the bracha. The minhag is to say it. The tzibur doesn't say the bracha of a Kaddish Shabbos or the bracha at the beginning either. Others say, the Rivash notes that maybe one should not say this, even if one has a tzibur, only say it if one is part of a kavua shul, because that was the original takana. It was in the shul, which was in the field, but it was niskan for a shul, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. We don't say it in a beis chasanim, in a beis avelim, where it is not a kavua shul. The Mishnah Berurah says maybe you need to say for Torah there, to make it into a kavua shul. V'yesh sefer Torah etzlam. Rav Moshe did not understand that. Why should you need a sefer Torah? Even if you need a kavua minyan, like the Rivash was machadesh, but why does a sefer Torah make it a kavua minyan? So that's why the minhag is as long as you don't need a sefer Torah, many have, but as long as it's a kavua minyan always. The minhag in Yerushalayim, because of the chashivas of Yerushalayim, is even not in a minyan kavua. That's what the Piskei Teshuvos quotes. Maybe it's only betoch the old city, Rav Shlomo Zalman suggests, but others say maybe it's anywhere in Yerushalayim. The Ben Ish Chai says it's such an important tefillah, I don't think you have to have a kavua minyan. He says, Iker Tam, there are many reasons that we don't know, many secret reasons, and therefore he says in source 37, Be'emes yish bat Tzora gadol al pi asod. Chazara. This is in place of Chazara Hashatz. Lachein im mispalim tzibur beis chasanim. Even if you're in a beis chasanim, a minhag is the chiv is to say it. V'chulu. Okay, but either way, the minhag is to say it only if there are kavua minyanim. What if there's a kavua minyan only for 2 months out of the year? You have a summer minyan, so the minhag is to say that. If you have a minyan in somebody's house every Friday night, if it's every Friday night, l'chora one can't say it. The question is, what if it moves? What if it's a minyan that moves to a different house to house? That's a little trickier. That's not as kavua of a minyan. Okay, that's Friday night. Shabbos morning, Shachris. So there we have a general halacha every day of not eating before davening, but Shabbos morning it gets trickier because one is not allowed to eat before Kiddush. So what about we drink water before davening in the morning? We have a little nibble sometimes. So what about Shabbos morning? So the poskim say that one can do that even on Shabbos morning because the chiyuv of Kiddush does not kick in until after one davens. Only after one davens, that's when it kicks in. But once the chiyuv of Kiddush kicks in, can't even have water. The Isha Yisrael says, you can't even have water, and therefore it gets a little difficult. What about a woman? If you're going to daven, then fine, you're going to daven and you can eat before that. But what if a woman is busy with her kids and she doesn't have time to daven, and she davens a little short tchina, as the Magen Avraham discusses in Hilchos Tefillah, a little bit. So after that, she was yosei her davening. So could she not eat now? Now does her rechiv of Kiddush kick in? So the Isha Yisrael suggests yes. Kivan sheyasei dechova b'tefillah zu asura litom afilu mayim ad shemakadesh. But he says, many are somech lahakel. So many are somech lahakel, yish b'yamal lismoch. If you're going to daven later more, then for sure. But there are others not quoted here, but it could be that she's connected to her husband, and if her Moshe has a tshuva like that, and if her husband isn't chayiv in Kiddush yet, then maybe she's not chayiv in Kiddush yet either. What if somebody has to eat before davening, mishum refuah, serious eating? You have to have a bowl of cereal, you have to wash, you have to have a sandwich. So does one make Kiddush then? So some say the Or Letzion suggests, Reb Sion Abishol, no. But according to most poskim, it sees that if you have to have a serious eating in the morning, Rav the Bir Alacha, Rav Moshe, Rav Adia, then one should recite Kiddush first. If it's not going to be just a nibble, but a serious eating, so then one should recite Kiddush. Good. We continue. Shabbos morning, so that's before davening. Now we got the davening, so we have an extended psuki to Zimra. The Torah quotes because we have more time. No, there's no bittul malacha, and therefore we have more time to praise Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We're more connected to Ruchnius on Shabbos, right? That's what the Shimon Kubetza says in Beit Sadav Tezayin. The Neshama Yesera is that we're more ruchani connected, and therefore we add in Mizmorim. If somebody forgot to add the Mizmor, let's say they went straight. Sometimes, once in a while, that happens. You're just following your siddur, and you say the weekday Psukei de Zimra. So you can add it in afterwards, even after Yishtabach. The Piskei Teshuvos quotes, you could add it in. Once the tzibur starts saying Kaddish, you should just go with the tzibur, and you can say the extra Tehillim afterwards. What's the bare bones? So we know Baruch Shamar Ashri Yishtabach on a weekday, but what about on Shabbos? So the Mishnah Berurah quotes that on Shabbos one is also mechuyev to say nishmas. That's also in that strong category. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes in 48, Mutav she'dalig mizmorim. You could skip other mizmorim, but you need to say Baruch Shamar Ashrei, Nishmas, and Yishtabach. Better to say that. And if you don't have any time, so that's the minimum. Baruch Shamar Ashrei, Nishmas, and Yishtabach. Rav Ovadia thinks, no, better to skip Nishmas, because that is only a minhag, and it's the Birchas HaShir that's mentioned in Psachim, and Tadiv She'eno Tadir. So you should say the other Mizmorim of Tehillim, the Halalukas, and all of that first. The message for us being, we shouldn't come so late. Right, we try to do our best to get there on time. If we didn't say anything, we just daven the Shachris davening in the morning. So what do we have to make up? So at least the Ramah quotes Lokel Asher Shavas. That paragraph, one should say, not the whole bracha, but at least that paragraph, because that captures the praise of That captures the praise of Shabbos. Okay, so that is all. Speaking about the davening of Shabbos, we spoke about Friday Mincha and Kabbalah Shabbos and Ma'ariv and all the aspects of Ma'ariv. You don't think there's so many halachas of Ma'ariv. There's Hashkivenu, there's all the psukim that we say, and there's Vayachulu, and there's Vayachulu during Shemona Esrei, and Vayachulu after Shemona Esrei, and there's Maggid Avos, and everything we just quoted, all of these interesting halachas, and then Shabbos morning, now we just quoted the idea of what about eating before davening, and how that is affected by the chiyuv of Kiddush. Okay, we continue now with shiur number 6, Hilchos Tefillah of Shabbos, part 2, Tefillah Musaf. So we get to Musaf. After davening, we get to Musaf. Get the Kriyas Torah we did during with the Shnayim Mikra. So the Gemara tells us that because there's a tefillah of Musaf, that helps us understand the machlokas and brachas on Daf Chavav, whether Keneged Avos or Keneged Tmidim. Well, Avos, there's only 3, and there's Musaf. So it must be Keneged Karbanos Tiknum. Everybody holds that. So that's what the Gemara says. Everybody holds that. We mentioned the Zohar that says maybe Musaf is Keneged Yosef HaTzadik. And we spoke then also about the sugya of Nitna Torah v'Nischadsha Halacha, that the Rambam quotes both Keneged Avos and Keneged Tmitim, and maybe that is related to the idea that there's a difference between the history of a mitzvah and why a mitzvah is obligatory upon us. The history of mitzvahs could be even from before Har Sinai, but the reason mitzvahs are obligatory upon us is because Moshe Rabbeinu told us at Har Sinai, Keneged Tmidim Tiknum. So again, Chazar that shiur, we're not going to get it back into that right now. But we have Musaf, which the Ashkenazim have Tikanta Shabbos. You go backwards with the Aleph base, and Sfaradim have their tefillah. The best time to daven Musaf is the Mishnah and Brachas. Musafim Kol Hayom, the Mishnah and Brachas in the 4th parak, either all day, according to the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda says Ad Sheva Sha'os, until the 7th hour, and that is definitely the Lachatchila, because the Gemara says that if somebody davens the whole day, Nikra Posheya. If one davens after the 7th hour, it's negligence. It's negligence. That doesn't mean he doesn't daven. But all the poskim, starting with the Rambam, clearly holds that it is a b'di'evet to daven after the 7th hour. There is no tashlumin when it comes to Musaf, because it's a different type of tefillah. Shachris you can make up by Musaf, Musaf by Shachris by Mincha, Mincha by Ma'ariv, Ma'ariv by Shachris. That's the whole idea of tashlumin. But Musaf is not rachmi. Musaf is a different category, and therefore there is no tashlumin when it comes to Musaf. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says in Reish Pei Vav. In source number 8, I'm on page 232, for those following along. There's no tashlumin. What happens? Most of the time, there's no problem with a tzibur davening before the 7th hour. Right? You don't get to Musaf so late. But on Yantif, for sure, Yom Kippur, Simchas Torah, often we daven Musaf after the 7th hour. So the Shevet HaLevi says, even though Rabbi Yochanan says Nikra Posheya, this is okay. Posheya means if you're just fooling around beforehand and doing other things. But here, Shevet HaLevi says, Yom Kippur de Ma'achrin lo machmas atzlus, ela machmas avoda hayom, the avoda of the other tefillas, then of course you're not called a posheya. You're not called a posheya. Good. The poskim talk about what happens if somebody gets to shul late and the tzibur is saying Musaf and you didn't daven Shachris yet. What about switching the order? Is that an issue? So the Mishnah Berurah says, Asur lahaktim shum karban lachatchila l'karban tamid shal shachar. Right, you're not supposed to. We need the Aseh Dashlama, the carbon tamid. It has to be the first and last carbon. With carbon Pesach is an exception, but you're not supposed to do that. B'di'evet yatsa, b'di'evet yosef. The Mishnah Berurah says if a person should try to order the tefillos properly, but if somebody comes late, so it's better to switch to daven Musaf with the tzibur davening Musaf and then switch. So the Minchas Yitzchak assumes, no, do not change. We don't change the order. Chazal instituted Shachris and then Musaf, and there's significance for the order of every tefillah. The Piskei Teshuvos quotes, "V'yesh l'seder hazeh ta'amim al pi niglev al pi nistar," and therefore we don't switch, even if it's late. Even if it's late, it's already time for Musaf. We don't switch the order. If you come late, you don't switch the order, and you should daven Shachris and then davening Musaf. So it's a Shiloh. Do you get tefillah b'tzibur for that? Okay, but either way, you shouldn't switch the order. What about women and davening Musaf? So we mentioned davening generally is a Zman Grama, but women, Rachmi Ninu, so women have to daven something, so they daven. Mishnah Berurah says Shachris and Mincha. What about Musaf? So the Nod Yehuda. The Nod Yehuda in a sefer that's Slach. Remember the Nod Yehuda's name was Rabbi Cheskel Landau. Named his one sefer after his father, the Nod Yehuda, and one after his mother, the Tzlach Tzil Lenefesh Chaya. So the Tzlach says, since the Gemara says that women have to daven because it's rachami, but Musaf is not rachami. Musaf is pure carbon sibur, and therefore women don't have to daven. Women don't have to daven. Tefillah chivin rachmana rabbanan kivin derachmi nenu fine b'shalosh tefillas hakavuos. But Musaf, which is not rachmi, it's a mitzvah say derabbanan shazvan grama, and therefore women are peturos. Women are peturos. Rabbi Kiva Eger adds another svara why women should be exempt, because they do not participate in the matzas hashekel. The matzas hashekel contributes and helps buy the karbanos of tzibur, and therefore women are pater from that. So therefore they're pater from Musaf as well. That's the chiddush Rabbi Kiva Eger in his tshuvas. But many other achronim wonder about this tshuva of Rabbi Kiva Eger. The Ber Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak Al-Chanan, spec to the Rav of Kavna for 30 years, 1800s, the Gadol Ador. He says, what do you mean? Everybody who's pater from Matzah Shekel doesn't have to daven Musaf? What about Kohanim? What about Leviim? What about Katanim? According to many Rishonim, less than 20 years old. So, Atukanim Leviim, Pchusim, Mi Ben Chav, Yiftru Mi Musaf? No. Musaf is not totally on the Shkalim. Davening Musaf is not totally on the Shekel. He rejects the comparison. So how do you answer for Rabbi Kiva Eger? He knew that kasha too. So you have to say the Steipler answers. Maybe there's two elements. Kohanim and Leviim, even if they don't have to give to Matzah Shekel, but they're still covered by the kapara of the carbon. They're still shayach in the world of the carbon. So let's say they're short. After the Matzah Shekel, they're short. They don't have enough money to buy the carbon. The Kohanim and Leviim would still be responsible to supply the difference. Women are totally mufka from the kapara. They're not included in the kapara of that sibur, and therefore maybe that could be a difference. Either way, machlokas, the Mishnah Berurah quotes both deos, whether women have to daven musaf or not. Rav Ovadia says that women are not obligated, but if they want to, they can. They want to, they can. Because generally, Sfardim don't like to daven extra tefillas and brachas for women if they're not mechuyev. But Mikol Makam says the Yaakov Yosef, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, im espalas musaf ein limchos biyadan sheish lam ha'meishi yismochu. Okay, fine. What about so we daven musaf? What about eating? So let's say you let it make kiddush after Shachris. So a Kiddush club is also for many reasons to eat during laning, right? And during Haftorah, you're being mavaza the Navi, you're being mavaza the Rav, you're being mavaza the davening. So we're not talking about that. What if there's a break? What about on Rosh Hashanah when there's a break? What about Simchas Torah? So the Gemara says in Brachas, asur to taste anything before davening Musaf. That's what Rav Huna says. Asur la'adam sheyitom klum kodem sheyispal tfilas Musaf. So Amar Lei, so the Amora said back that no. What do you mean? She should have davened Musaf at home and then and eaten something. He said, what do you mean? Daven Musaf? I can't daven Musaf before the Tzibur. V'cholu. The Gemara continues, but the Gemara ends off by saying we don't pass like Rav Huna. We don't pass that there's an isser to eat before Musaf, and therefore one can eat. The Chiv of Kiddush kicks in after Shachris, and therefore one is allowed to eat. The Shulchan Aruch says, Mutter litom kodem tfilas musafin. It's mutter, not a whole big meal, but achilas peiros, or afilu pasmuat, a little bit, afilu te'ima, kadesh yisod halev, avos su'uda aser. Right, which makes it a little challenging. Su'uda aser mimanafshach. We're going to learn about the principle of kiddush b'makom su'uda. So if you're allowed to eat something before Musa, that means you have to make kiddush beforehand. But if you make kiddush requires a suda. So mimanafshach, you have a problem. So there are a couple of suggestions given, all of them basically being don't have a whole meal. Don't have a whole meal. Different suggestions given for what to do. How is it possible to eat specifically a small amount when you have to write kiddush and b'makam sudas? The Magen Avraham says maybe one could validate the kiddush with the wine or the fruit, and then daven in place, and then have hamotzi right afterwards. Maybe the Mishnah Berurah quotes one could have up to a kazayas, a kabetza bread, right? Maybe just eat fruit. But again, that's a problem. That's not suda. Rav Shlomo Zalman says, and this is the heter l'chora, if everybody is there together, you're going to remember to daven musaf, and therefore you could have mizonos. You probably shouldn't wash, but most people don't wash at these kiddushes. Shlomo Zalman says you could even eat grain-based snacks in an amount even exceeding that of a beitzah, because everybody's going to remind you, and that's the Shmir Shabbos, nog lo hakel v'biner targima, right? In the places where there's a break on, let's say, Rosh Hashanah or Simchas Torah. Good. The Yalkut Yosef has a discussion of what about and others as well. What about where Kohanim want a duchen? So if they have wine, that's a problem, because there's a certain amount of wine that if they drink, they can't duchen anymore. So the best thing to do is for a Kohen to be yotze with somebody else's kiddush and not drink anything. Could a Kohen have a little bit? Is it possible for a Kohen to have a little bit of wine and duchen? Yeah, there are. If it's a little bit. What if we spoke about then? If one doesn't have wine but they're very weak, is it possible to eat before Musaf without making kiddush? We mentioned that. There is a Tzad L'Hakel. The Yaakov Yosef has a Sfek Sfeika possibly. Okay, these are all issues relating to Musaf and eating. Mincha. We're up to Mincha. Mincha of Shabbos. So Mincha starts off with Ashrei Uvalat Zion. Where's Uvalat Zion coming up? Well, we didn't see Uvalat Zion in the morning. That's why we're making it up now. We're making it. We didn't want to be Tercha de Sibura, have such a long davening in the morning, so we say Uvalat Zion in the afternoon. Then we have a Kaddish, which is the Kaddish HaMitzaref, as we spoke about. You need a Kaddish HaMitzaref to bring everybody together. And then we have Kriyas HaTorah. We say Va'anis Tfilasi L'cha. There's a beautiful kobo. There's Tfilasi L'cha. After a whole day of eating an oneg, so we reflect that other nations, they would just be wasted and whatever they're doing. But we come back to shul. Va'ani Tfilasi L'cha Hashem Eis Ratzon. It's an Eis Ratzon now. I want to channel all of my eating and all of my drinking to you. So we see Vanis Filasi, we take out the Torah, we lane the next week's Parsha. We mentioned then the thought from Rav Devenzal, because a Jew always knows there's another week's Parsha. Whatever's going on in your life, there's going to be another week. There's going to be another week's Parsha. Good. The Mishnah Berurah quotes that we have the Kaddish we say before Shemona Esrei, not after laning. Unlike Kriyas HaTorah by Shachris, there's no maftir. There's no maftir there to be mafsik it from. But that's one. We say one Kaddish. Different types of Kaddishim. Kaddish HaMitzaref, Kaddish HaMafsik, Kaddish Tiskabel, all different types. And then we have the special tefillah, the Amidah for Mincha, and then we have Tzidkascha. What do we say Tzidkascha for? It's Tziduk Hadin. We're matzdik the din. Why? Because at that time, the Abu Dram quotes all of the neshamas that had a respite on Shabbos go back to Gehenim, getting ready to go back to Gehenim, so we're matzdik the din. Others say the Torah quotes Moshe Rabbeinu died at that time, which gets a little sticky because Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Chazal, wrote many Sifrei Torah on the last day of his life, so he couldn't have written it on Shabbos, so maybe he wrote it the day before, and Hashem buried him on Shabbos, that's the Bach. Others say that Yosef and David also died at this time. Either way, we're matzdik the din for all of those reasons. We'll get to Shalosh Shudas by Hashem in the future, and we'll talk about whether it's appropriate to eat Shalosh Shudas at this time. Rabbeinu Tam says, no, how can you? The neshamas are going back. We paskin you can. One skips Tzidkascha if one wouldn't be saying Tachnun during the week. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Imchalbo sheilu haya yom chol lo haya omer bo tzitfila nifilas apayim ein omrim tzidkascha. You don't say tzidkascha. There are different practices also of the order of the psukim of tzidkascha, 3 different psukim in Tehillim, but different orders, some connected to Moshe, David, and Yosef. Others say it's in order of the Tehillim. Either way, this is what's mentioned. Do you say it if there's a chasen or a sandik or it can't be a sandik because there was no bris that. I'm sorry, it could be a bris that day if it was a bris bismano. So that's a discussion. The Yaakov Yosef says maybe you would say tzidkascha. You only say it on a calendaric day tour, but not otherwise. Okay, different days. And then we get to Ma'ariv. Ma'ariv on Motzi Shabbos. Ma'ariv Motzi Shabbos, we try to do a little bit later. The Shulchan Aruch says Ma'achrin. So we don't show Hashem that we can't wait to get out of Shabbos. Ma'achrin Tfilas Arvis Kedei Lahosif Michol Ala Kodesh. And that's what the Gemara says in Shabbos. Rav Yossi says, I want my chelik to be with those who bring in Shabbos in Tveria. It's early because Tveria is all the way in the valley, so it gets darker earlier. And the ones that are Motzi Shabbos in Sipori, because they extend Shabbos in that way. And the Piskei Yeshuvas quotes, we should do our best not to rush out of Shabbos. We have Ma'ariv and we have Atachon Antanu. We make Atachon Antanu in the first weekday bracha, we stick it in there. Because also you can't have bakashas until it's made Havdalah. So right after we make Havdalah, we say Atachon Elodim Das Malam Elenu Shbina, which is a praise. And then right before Chanenu Me'itacha, it's beautifully meduyak. Right before Chanenu Me'itacha, we say Atachan Antanu. So now it's Havdalah, so now we can have Bakashas. So we stick it in right there, Havdalah. Good. The Gemara tells us that originally they had Havdalah in Shemona Esrei, but then, and not with wine. Then we had with wine, but then we became poor, so we put it back into Shemona Esrei. Eventually, Chazal were just kovei it always in davening and afterwards, and alakos both. If one forgets Atachan Antanu, one does not repeat. But the Gemara says, a line that some Rishonim understand, and the Shulchan Aruch quotes it, that if I forgot and then I ate before Havdalah, then I have a knas and I have to repeat Shmoneh Esrei. But otherwise, I don't have to repeat Shmoneh Esrei. Good. What happens if somebody forgets? We spoke about all the halachas of tefillah on Shabbos. What if somebody makes a mistake? What if somebody davens the whole weekday Shmoneh Esrei? Okay, you got to repeat. That's no good. But what happens if you're in the middle? You're in the middle of davening, and then you realize, right, usually by Slach Lanu, we realize we're in the middle of weekday. So the halacha is, as we know, finish the bracha. Finish the bracha, because really, technically, we're mechuyev in saying the whole weekday Shmoneh Esrei on Shabbos. It's just that Chazal had Rachmanus on us. They said Tircha de Sibura. But if you're in the middle of a bracha, you finish the bracha. You finish the bracha. What happens if you said the word Ata, and you're about to say Chonin, and you remembered it's Shabbos? We know it's Shabbos. It's not like we forgot at Shabbos. So the poskim talk about the Trumas Hadesh and the Beis Yosef quotes, and others talk about, well, what if you don't know it's Shabbos? Generally, that doesn't happen nowadays. Generally, we know it's Shabbos, and it's just because of Hergela de Lashon. We start talking because that's what we don't have Kavanah. Everybody would know. We know it's Shabbos. So in that case, Lamaskana, we generally hold like the Magen Avram, even though the Shulchan Aruch and the Trumas Hadesh was not like that. The Magen Avram says you go by your words. If you said the word Atah, so then you can still stop and say Ata Echad or Ata Chonim. Once you say you could say the Shabbos. Once you said the next word, so then you got to finish the bracha and then go back to the beginning of Ata Kidashta or Ata Echad. By Shachris, Yismach Moshe. So there's nothing to talk about. Once you say Ata, that's already a start of a bracha, and therefore just say the bracha. And again, we spoke about different types of mistakes then. If you switched different Shmoneh Esreis by mistake, you're not choser. The Shulchan Aruch says in source 56, if you daven Shachris for Mincha and Mincha for Ma'ariv, so one does not go back. If Musaf was in there, then you probably have to be choser, because like we said, that's a different category of tefillah. Different category of tefillah. What about Tashlumin? So again, if somebody missed one there, you make up Tashlumin, right? You don't daven two Musafs, not Musaf, right? The Eshel Avram says, so Musaf. If you miss Shachris and Musaf, so you daven Mincha. So there's this day of the Eshel Avram that says you daven Musaf and afterwards Mincha, and then Tashlumin, Yisbach Moshe. Generally, the Pri Megadim argues and says Musaf is not subject to Tashlumin, as we said before, and therefore you just you don't have it. You don't have it. Gets into the lumdus of Tashlumin. We discussed a little bit. Is Tashlumin makeup or just a double tefillah now? There's enough geminas for that. But that is, in terms of tefillah, this was all about the second shiur about tefillah that we spoke about. Next, shiur number 7, Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum. Shnai Mikra, the Gemara in Brachas tells us that if somebody is chazers the parsha with the tzibur, Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum, it's one of the number of items in Maseches Brachas that for which one gets long life. There's a remez of the Balaturim, beginning of Shmos, to Shnai Mikra, but it's a din d'Rabbanan, l'chora tachana d'Rabbanan, to be maver sedra as it is called. Rashi explains why does the Gemara say even a teres v'divon, even though they don't seem to be the most exciting psukim, one still has to do it. Tosfos notes that what do you mean targum is a dafka targum. So Tosfos says maybe you could do it in other languages, but Tosfos says no, the targum is special. It was given at Har Sinai, the Onkelos, and therefore that's what you have to do. The Rishonim, though, say you could do Rashi. And we mentioned then the godless of Rashi. Rashi got into a din of the Gemara. Right, he went back a couple hundred years because they think that the godless of Rashi, so you could do Rashi as well. The Smag quotes that Ani Danti L'fnei Rabosai Shapirish Mol Yosem and Targum, which is better, Rashi, Targum. So the Shulchan Aruch Lamaisa says that Yirei Shamayim should try to do both. Onkelos is better than Rashi because Onkelos is on every pasuk. Rashi is better than Onkelos because it's Masbir and based on Chazal. So Yirei Shamayim should try to do both, as the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Adifus for one over the other. The Mishnah Berurah does quote, if there's a pasuk without Rashi, then just say the pasuk again. Say the pasuk a third time. Can one use an English translation or an English pirush? So we mentioned from David Feinstein, yes, maybe it's best not just to do a translation, but like Rashi and Onkelos don't just translate, they explain. So maybe to do a pirush also. So that's what we said, the bottom of the stone chumash is better than just the top translation. What about using the kriya, the laning for one of the times? So one technically can. It's best to say it in an undertone with the balkore. if one wants to be Yotzei. Again, not loud enough to disturb anybody, but you'll be Yotzei with saying it. The Mishnah Berurah quotes that one can use that. One can use that. Good. Other details of the Mishnah. There are different, Mishnah Berurah quotes different ways to do it. Do you do pasuk, targum, pasuk? Different ways to understand it. Maybe it goes to the lumdus of why you need the different Shnai Mikra, why not one? Rabbi Yaakov Ramnetsky says one's a din of Kriya and one's a din of learning. So Kriya maybe go straight, right? And then the learning is pasuk targum. However one does it is fine. Elu ve'elu, Divri Elokim Chaim, whatever works. And you could switch 1 week this way, 1 week that way, whichever. If somebody only has a certain amount of time, they want to do one aliyah, right? Also, so that's okay. The Mishnah also quotes, do you do one aliyah a day? Do you do it all Friday night? Do you do it, split it up? However one does it is good. The Trumas Hadasha notes, and the Shulchan Aruch quotes it, that we don't have to do Shnai Mikra for the Yantif. Why is that? If the reason for Shnai Mikra is to get us ready for the laning, then we should have to do it on Yantif. But if it's about every Jew should have a connection to call Chamishi Chimsha Torah every year, so then you don't need to do it again, because you're going to get it during the parsha that it comes up, and therefore it was not Misukan to do it for Yantif. And also one doesn't have to do the Haftorahs, that's the Ramah. Ein Sorach Likros HaHaftorah Umikol Makam Noagu. Right, the minhag is he quotes, but that one doesn't have to. One doesn't have to. When's the beginning? When's the end? It says Yashlim Parshi Yosef Imat Tzibur. When's the Imat Tzibur? So earliest time, either Mincha time on Shabbos. That's what Tosfos quotes, or actually when you davened Mincha. Right, one of those two. Others say Sunday. That's the language of the Shulchan Aruch, but the Mishnah Berurah quote doesn't really mean Sunday. It means from Mincha. Once you start laning the next week, then already it is good enough. So that's the earliest time to do it. When's the latest time? So one should try. Tosfos quotes that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi told his children should try to finish it before you eat Shabbos morning. Try to finish. Wake up early. If you're running behind the Shnai Mikra, wake up early Shabbos morning and do it then. If one didn't get to finish it then finish it by Mincha time. If you didn't get to finish it by Mincha time, by Tuesday night. If you can finish it by Tuesday night, Shmini Atzeres, when everybody finishes the Tzorah. So you have all those. Again, we try to do it during the week. That would be the best. The Shulchan Aruch quotes all of those opinions. Again, the earliest time, Mincha time. The latest time, Shmini Atzeres, if one needs. Do women have to do Shnai Mikra? No, I mean, it's wonderful if they do, and it's encouraged. Do they have a chiyuv? L'chora, it's an outgrowth of the chiyuv of Talmud Torah, which women do not have a chiyuv of Talmud Torah, but it's definitely encouraged for women to be maver sedra like this as well. There's a lot more there about doing it with the ta'amim. Moshe Feinstein writes that it's very important for everybody to be maver sedra, even the greatest gedolim in the world, and you spend all day on Ksos and Nesivos and Reb Chaim's. Still, Rav Moshe writes, Pashu du barer, k'moshe lo niftar shum adam mikol mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Nobody could get out of any mitzvah d'Rabbanan by saying Osek b'Torah. So too from this mitzvah, so we have to be mechazik this mitzvah of being maver sedra shnai mikra. Relating to general kriyas haTorah on Shabbos, the Mishnah tells us in Masechas Megillah, we know there are different numbers of aliyos for every day of laning. Shabbos has 7, Yom Kippur has 6, Shabbos has 7. Keneged psukim that are quoted. Some say that the Shiboli Haleket quotes another reason why we have 7, not just because of the psukim, that if somebody if you didn't hear Baruch Hu the whole week, so you could get 7 Baruch Hus and be Yotzei the 7. Generally, one does not repeat. One does not repeat psukim in order to give more aliyos. Right? There's a minhag that's quoted. The Ravya, the Rivash quote. It's a minhag. The Ravya was not happy about it. The Rivash said there's no problem with repeating. Our minhag is generally not to repeat. The Shulchan Aruch quotes in Reish Pei Beis that source number 40 that muter likros olam harbe aval bishes karazeh mashakarazeh chozim avarech. I was in a shul last year in a European city, and they read Shishi like 7 times over and over and over again. Maybe they wanted to get more money from the Misha Berachs. The Rama quotes that the minhag of Ashkenazim not to do that, except for Simchas Torah. In any case, even if one repeats, that does not count towards the 7 aliyos, the 7 olim that one needs. But generally, we don't we don't repeat. The Maggid Avram discusses whether we repeat on other days. Umashma b'chala poskim. The Maggid Avram says shafilu ha'idna. Even today, shekulam mevarchim mutar lahosef. You might think that in the days of old, when they only the first ola and the second last ola made the brachas fine. You could add in because you're just reading psukim. But now, when everybody makes their own brachas, maybe it's a chash brachal of atala if you have more than 7. But we assume not. Magen Avraham says the minhag is to be mosif if there is a need. Could a katan get one of the aliyos? So that's a Mishnah in Megillah. It seems like yes. I call olam minyan shiva. Yeah, the katan could get, and the Shulchan Aruch paskins that way. I call olam minyan shiva. If you isha v'katan, sheyodei lemim mavarchin. But Chachamim say isha shouldn't because of kavarat tzibur, and the Rama adds that they can be mitztaref, but they shouldn't be all. Shouldn't give all 7 katanim the aliyah, but he can take part. Can take part. The Prima Gadim discusses that a katan could even be motzi because a katan could be motzi others in dinim derabanan. That gets into the chazaka derabba. I think we discussed then that if there is a child who reaches years shanim, we assume he has physical maturity simanim, 2 pubic hairs, but that we rely on that chazaka for dinim derabanan. Not for dinim daraisa. So the Pri Megadim says kriyas haTorah is derabanan. So even a katan can be motzi, a balkori for others, but generally we don't. That's not our minhag to do this. If it's a shas atchak, if Rav Moshe talks about a situation where a bar mitzvah boy prepared the wrong parsha, he was 1 week too early, would we let him? But l'chadchila we generally do not let him. The Magen Avraham quotes the minhag is to only let in a katan in Ashkenazic circles have maftir, not others. Rav Ovadia says according to the letter of the law, a child could receive any aliyah, but he quotes that is not the minhag, even in Sephardic circles. That is not done. Maftir is seems to be an extra aliyah. Can it be counted leminyan shiva or not? So that is a discussion in the Gemara. Me'ikar adim, we see to paskin that it can be part of the minyan shiva. We have on a fast day we have a maftir which is shlishi, but our minhag is to add on an aliyah and not to have maftir as a separate aliyah. But we don't want to just have it broken up, and maybe the Gemara talks about people didn't want maftir because it was an extra aliyah, so he gave them the haftarah also. But it's also, you don't want people just to have a haftarah because then it seems like it's equal to the kriyas haTorah, so we give a little of the Torah to the Baal haftarah also, in order to make him happy that he has it, but not to make it equal to the rest of the Torah. The idea that we have a haftarah, the Torah quotes and the Abu Dram, that there was times that there were gzeirus, and therefore we picked a part of Navi that connects to the kriyas haTorah that they weren't allowed to do in certain times. But even though we're allowed to do the kriyas haTorah now, we still have the minhag of doing the haftarah. We spoke then about the hierarchy of the best to the worst. The best is to read it from a klaf. Next, if you don't have a klaf, but at least from a whole sefer, an entire sefer Tanakh, or at least an entire sefer of haftarahs, if one only has a chumash with haftarahs in them, so we paskin that is the minhag is to do that. So whatever one has, one could use. The Rav Ovadia says it's better to use a klaf, even if it's only haftarahs. You're right, the haftarahs on the klaf. Right, not just have the seforim on the klaf. Okay, who could read the haftarah? So usually we have the Baal Maftir is the one that reads the haftarah. Could somebody read it for someone else? So we discussed then. What about a katan and the like? But nowadays, even if somebody reads it out loud, so usually the koreh says it quietly to themselves, so you don't even get into the issue. But again, we discussed then about what about a katan. Okay, just the last topic to get into. We started discussing Kiddush. We started discussing the introduction, the laws of Kiddush, number 1. We'll have a number more of these in the next volume. First, the chiyuv of Kiddush. What is the chiyuv of Kiddush? It's fulfilling a mitzvah da'oraisa of Zarchas Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. We know that, Zachreo ala yayin. But what's da'oraisa? So at least saying the words is da'oraisa. That's what Rov Rishonim say, that we saw, Tosfos and others, that saying the words of Kiddush is da'oraisa. And Kiddush, we mean the second half of Kiddush. Asher Kiddushanim b'mitzvos v'ratzavanu, that's Kiddush. The first half is Edus, that's another Vayachulu, as we discussed earlier. So saying it with words. What about saying it al hakos? So there are some Rishonim that give off the impression, the Ran sounds like saying it al hakos, holding the cup, is also part of the mitzvah daraisa. That's not what the Rambam says. The Rambam says mitzvahs aseh l'kadesh bidvarim. The Beis Yosef quotes this Ran along with the Rambam, but if he thinks there's a machlokas here, so he should have clarified, because he always defends the Rambam. So it's the Bach and others assume that the Ran shouldn't be taken literally, that there's no mitzvah daraisa al hakos. But either way, to say the words is daraisa, and some say al hakos, some rishonim, and there is a mafarish in Nazir that says even drinking the wine is daraisa, but we generally don't paskin that way. Okay, the Magen Avraham says that the mitzvah daraisa is fulfilled through davening. Why? When you daven, you already spoke about beautiful things, but Shabbos, remember Shabbos to sanctify it. Davening is, you sanctify it, beautiful. And therefore, when you get home, it's only mitzvah d'Rabbanan you have left of doing a kiddush ala yayin. That's the Magen Avraham. Nirali dimi daraisa, but kiddush amar b'tfilah sagi. The dekra dechsiv zachos yom Shabbos harei zachar oso. And kiddush b'rakam sudas d'Rabbanan. So mida araisa, your yotze in shul, says the Magen Avraham. Big, very important afkaminas. When you come home, are you yotze? Are you chayiv only mida Rabbanan? If your wife didn't make kiddush yet, your wife is chayiv d'araisa. And you're only chayiv d'Rabbanan. Could a d'Rabbanan be motzi d'araisa? What about a katan? What if you're not sure if you make kiddush safek? So there's issues. But either way, the Bir Halacha already notes that this Magen Avraham is a Kiddush, because the Gemara in Pesachim seems to say that by Kiddush you have to mention Zechirus Yitzias Mitzrayim as part of Kiddush. And you don't say that in the Friday night, in the davening, Friday night. You don't say Zechirus Yitzias Mitzrayim. On Yontif you do, but on Shabbos you don't. So who says that you're Yotzei? Number one. And number two, the Torah Tamima answers that and says, well, maybe, if you look closely at that Gemara, maybe that Gemara is only talking about Kiddush on Pesach night, not Kiddush every Friday night. That's what the Torah Tamima says in Shmos, so maybe that's not, maybe that's what the Magen Avraham assumes. But either way, based on this, is a discussion in the Achronim, is it good to have kavana during davening for Kiddush or not? So some say no, because you want to do it in the best way that Chazal told you to do it, and therefore have kavana not to be Yotzei Kiddush, and then you'll be Yotzei later on, the Daraisa. Or others say, no, this is the first time you're making, you're being Makadei Shabbos. So the Kaf HaChaim discusses that one who davened had kavana, one who had kavana to be yotzei. The Chassam Sofer discusses what about Yom Kippur, where you're not going to make kiddush later. So discussions that we had about the type of kavana that one needs. The other point to mention, though, the Minchas Chinuch brings us up, and that is another problem with the Magen Avraham. Maybe once Chazal said that you're only yotzei kiddush in this way, holding a cup, so then maybe even midaraisa, there's no mitzvah of kiddush anymore by itself. Maybe you have to do it in the way that Chazal told you to do it, right? In this way, just like benching, you're only yotzei maybe with the words that Chazal told you to say. So again, that's if the Rabbanan tell you how to do a mitzvah, is there a daraisa way to do it and a Rabbanan way to do it, or we say there's only one way, the Rabbanan way to do it. Rabbi Kiva Eger also says maybe you're yotzei even not with davening, maybe just with saying Good Shabbos. So maybe, that doesn't have to see as Mitzrayim. So assuming that way, that also would be assuming like the Magen Avraham. Who's chayiv to make kiddush? So all men are chayiv, and all women. The Gemara in Brachos Daf Chaf, you have it there on page 335, that women are chayiv in all the mitzvahs of Shabbos, Zachar v'Shamar. They're chayiv in all the mitzvahs of Shabbos, even though it's a Zman Grama, because they're chayiv in all the los aseis, so they're chayiv in all the aseis. A woman can be motzi a man. Me'ikar adin. They have the same chiyuv of kiddush, and even though by Megillah they can't, but that's because some Rishonim say by Megillah the mitzvah is different for women. Maybe a mitzvah of shmiya and not of a kriya. But here by kiddush the mitzvah is equal, and therefore one can be motzi. Another. There is a big discussion of the Dogam Mervava. Dogam Mervava brings up a rush. Dogam Mervava says, based on a rush in Shab and in Brachas, maybe women aren't included in Arvus. So maybe a man can't be motzi a woman, because she's not included. Eina bechlal arvus. So that's the Dogam Mervav, and therefore it's a shaila about if you get home and you're already yotzei midaraisa and the woman hasn't davened yet, so maybe you can't be motzi them. So that's why some achronim say to be machmer for this Dogam Mervava, or Rav Asher Weiss writes this in his bencher, and that is women should daven Meir Friday night, so they can be on the same page with their husband. Rabbi Kiva Eger, though, says, look closely at that rush that the Dogam Mervava is based on. The rush doesn't say that women are excluded from Arvus. There's no Gemara like that. The Gemara would have to say that. There's no Gemara like that women are excluded from Arvus. All the rush means is, in the tzad, that women are obligated in a mitzvah, so maybe they're not obligated in the Arvus. That's all. That's the yesod. Right, the Gemara there is talking about maybe women aren't included in benching. So any mitzvah that someone is not included in the chiyuv, so then fine, you could say there's no arvas. But in general, of course, women are included in arvas, and therefore it wouldn't be a problem. What about a katan? Could a katan make kiddush for a gadol? So a katan is only chayiv midrabanan at most. So maybe if a katan didn't daven, didn't make kiddush, nothing, and a gadol came home and daven, so maybe that's a katan derabanan being motzi a derabanan. A katan should a woman has a chayiv daraisa, so a katan only chayiv derabanan. So a katan should not be kiddush. If a husband's away, the 10-year-old should not be making kiddush. Right, the mother should be making kiddush because she has a chayiv daraisa, while the katan only has a chayiv derabanan. Okay, this takes us through the first year on Kiddush. By the Hashem, next time we'll pick up with volume number 17, the next halachas relating to Kiddush. Have a great day.